So I was nearly 2 years old when my family left my home country of Yugoslavia. It was the first of many such trips. And on my first day of nursery school in my new adoptive country of Sweden, my mom walked me to the school. She dropped me off. And as she was walking away, she turned around, as most parents do, to take one more look at me to make sure that I was okay. After all, she was entrusting her toddler to strangers for the very first time in a country whose language neither her nor I spoke. Well, it seems that I was also very much in tune with the gravity of the situation, because what she saw when she turned around was a brave little face wearing a very awkward-looking smile and eyes full of tears that never overflowed. I said, "Hej då," which means bye in Swedish. It was the only expression that I knew. And I waved at her, signaling that I was okay, that I'll be fine by myself, that she shouldn't worry. She, in turn, mirrored this same response. And there you had it, the very first signs of emotional containment between my mother and I. The exchanging of a message that we must always show we're brave to each other, even when we're breaking inside, and that we mustn't burden each other with the heaviness of our emotions. There you had the firing and wiring of neurons that encoded some of the first shoulds into my brain. These shoulds said, you should always appear to be strong, you should never show that you're breaking inside, and you must never burden another person with your difficult experience. Now, I was too young to even know that I was, but such is the emotional mechanism of our brain, and such is the communication mechanism between our brain and the brain of our caregiver. We are constantly sending and receiving signals, and the most important one is, I'm safe, I'm okay. And that's what I was trying to tell my mom that day, and that's what she was trying to tell me too. Now, my mom and I have since fully made up for that first tearless emotional struggle. We cry all the time now, so that's fine. But in trying to ease each other's distress, we unfortunately also lay the groundwork for a very narrow array of emotions deemed to be acceptable, and a few specific ones that were not. Now, if you don't have your phone out already, I would like you to take it out now, please. And in the next couple of seconds, just have a quick think back to your childhood. So what were some of your earliest emotional shoulds and should nots? Just a couple of emotions. So which ones were you really encouraged to express, and which ones were you not? So I'm sure you'll find that at least some of these shoulds and should nots are still having an impact on your life. I am still trying to loosen up the constrictive grip on some of my heavy emotions and try and create more of a balance with the lighter ones. And I will do for the rest of my life. And it is because I find there to be so much beauty in that effort to diversify and to balance that I'm here with you today talking about the topic of emodiversity. Now, here is a thought. I so wish that my child expressed their fear and devastation and anger, said no parent ever. It's difficult witnessing children, especially our own, going through difficult emotions. We want them to stop it. We want to distract them. We want them to just smile. We want them to be brave. Sometimes we even want to punish them. Now, for me, my earliest emotional should was being brave. The should not was being afraid. And just earlier, you may have found it to have been something a little bit different in your own life, but we all have this set of rules, and they help to create a very rigid pattern, a habit of experiencing only a few emotions that we're allowed to and that we're familiar with, which then makes us miss out on a whole range of other ones. And research has shown that we humans do tend to only experience about 2 to 4 emotions on a regular basis. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's a crying shame, because some of the estimates indicate that we may actually have as many as 300. So it's time that we take emodiversity and add to dictionary. So emodiversity describes the experiencing of a variety of emotions on a regular basis, both pleasant and unpleasant, that an individual is able to accurately recognize, label, and describe. And in the next 15 minutes or so, what I aim to do is to infuse you with the 3 essences of emodiversity. The first one is becoming fluent in the language of emotions. The second one is allowing yourself to experience your negative emotions. And the third one is to start making intentional decisions about how you want to feel. Now, I'm curious, and you can just nod at me, how many of you use the word stressed to describe how you're feeling on a regular basis? Great. Oh, hands coming up. Okay, wonderful. Wasn't expecting that. Okay, and let me guess how that leaves you feeling. Overwhelmed? Okay. And do you know why? Well, because feeling stressed doesn't really mean anything. Well, and it potentially means everything. You know that person who can never tell you what they're hungry for when you ask them what they want to eat? So it's a little bit like that. It's a very general term that can mean anything. So is your coworker humiliating you at work? Are you nervous about your future at the company? Are your parents undermining your integrity by pressuring you to get married? So I don't want to continue and raise the stress levels in this room, but you get the gist, specificity. Some people also call it granularity. So you can't manage and address your stress without using the specific emotional language to describe what is actually going on beneath. And feeling stressed is only one of the ways in which we tend to overgeneralize. Any lover of Disney Pixar would have seen the wonderful Inside Out, and hands coming up, wonderful. Yep, I've seen it 3 times. Okay, maybe 4. And knows that we have a handful of basic emotions. So these are fear, disgust, joy, sadness, and anger. So these are the basics that you must be aware of. Okay, and most psychological scientists do tend to agree that this is the correct list of our basic emotions. But some more recent research at the University of California at Berkeley seems to indicate that we have potentially as many as 27 basic ones. And I want to list a few of them for you now because I would like to get you thinking about if and how often you experience some of these emotions. And as I'm saying them, I invite you to also intentionally experience them now, here in this room, in your minds and your bodies. So, interest, confusion, sexual desire, empathic pain, entrancement. Now, you may have noticed that if you were to dig a little bit deeper, each one of these emotions then consists of a number of other ones. So, for example, if you look at sexual desire, it can consist of excitement, anticipation, pining, and even sadness if the object of your desire is not available to you. Now, if by now it sounds to you like we're speaking a different language, you're right, but it's not a foreign one. It's a language that each one of you carries inside of you. It's actually your first language. It's just that no one ever gave you the dictionary and helped you become fluent. And becoming fluent in your emotional language is the most important path that will lead you to diversify your emotional life. First, because you have to know that an emotion is an emotion available to be felt. And second, because what is ultimately the aim of any language? Communication. Have you ever been misunderstood because someone didn't understand how you felt? Have you ever been misunderstood because you weren't able to communicate how you felt? Perhaps these 2 questions are actually asking the same thing. Now, I would like to tell you a little bit about the biggest study done so far on emodiversity. So the researchers looked at over 37,000 people and collected data from them and found some really fascinating correlations. So what they found was that positive emodiversity, so experiencing a range of positive emotions, was associated with lower levels of depression, which makes sense. What they also found, though, was that global emodiversity, so experiencing a variety of both positive and negative emotions, also led to lower levels of depression. And what they also found was that negative emodiversity on its own was also associated with lower levels of depression. Now, why would it be the case that experiencing a more diverse range of negative or unpleasant emotions would potentially lead to lower levels of depression? It perhaps sounds a little bit counterintuitive. Well, the possible explanation I want to offer you now has a little bit to do with my first tearless day at a Swedish nursery school, and it's also the second essence of emodiversity that I had mentioned earlier, and it is this: suppressing our heavy, negative, and unpleasant emotions leads us to feeling worse in the long run. On the other hand, allowing these emotions to run their course through us like an electrical current, if you will, ultimately leads to less depression and to greater well-being, as does being able to identify these with specificity. Now, did I come to this TEDx talk to be told to feel horrible? You might be thinking. No, absolutely not. But here's the thing: we can't not experience our negative or unpleasant emotions. Why? Well, because significant parts of our brain are not only specialized in detecting threatening stimuli in our environment and reacting to them with some of our basic emotions, but also laying these experiences down to memory so that we always know to look out for them. So this is what we call our negativity bias. So for example, if at the end of this talk I get overwhelmingly positive feedback, and I get as few as 2 pieces of incredibly negative feedback, which do you think that I will become focused on for days? Okay, maybe even weeks. So that is our protective survival mechanism. A little bit misplaced, perhaps, in this day and age, but we don't have much choice over it. What we do have a choice over, though, is what we do with these emotions. And what I propose we have to do, not only with our children, but with ourselves, is let these emotions be. Now, research has shown that, chemically speaking, our emotions tend to last only about 6 seconds inside of our bodies, and then they pass on. Now, I invite you to not trust me and the other scientists on this, so the next time that you feel a really heavy or unpleasant emotion coming on, and you catch yourself thinking things such as, oh no, I have to stop it, I have to get away, I have to get out, I have to turn on Netflix, I have to take another shot, freeze, and press pause on those thoughts, and replace them with something like this. I'm curious how long this anger is going to stick around. Let me see. I'll say that one more time. I'm curious to see how long this anger will stick around. Let me see. Can you feel the difference? The difference between the intention to become curious and explore this emotion the way you would a brand new foreign object put in your hand for the very first time, as opposed to wanting to stomp it out immediately, like a cockroach. Now, since we're on the topic of emotions, I have to say that I did originally want to use a photo of the real thing, but I felt such intense disgust that I couldn't. I had to settle for this one. But in any case, it can mean the difference between feeling bad for 6 seconds as compared to feeling bad for years. And I'm sure we've all had some experience of negative or unpleasant emotions that we didn't deal with, which then built, became stronger, and kept coming back again and again. And this is what we often see with our clients in psychotherapy as well. So what I'm talking about here is being emotionally intelligent. And that, among other things, means being mindful, being aware, and being intentional. Now, many of our emotions come from a place where these things don't live. a very reactive place. Certainly, our basic ones do. So again, going back to disgust, bam, it's immediate. I don't really even have to think about it. And our basic emotions are our first responders. Or if you're a fan of graphic novels, you can think of them as our watchmen. So they developed over hundreds of thousands of years to help us survive in the wilderness that was our planet back then. And they were so good at it that they still remain intact, which is wonderful, but not if you're spending all of your time or most of your time enveloped in one of them, limited to experiencing only a very narrow emotional range. We all know that person who loses their temper incredibly quickly and spends most of their days in anger, or that person who's incredibly fearful of everything. Maybe you're that person. So how do you diversify that problem? Well, it's somewhat simple by choosing to. When was the last time that you experienced admiration, or relief, or awe? Experiencing our negative or unpleasant emotions, we don't have absolute control over. But when it comes to the rest of the spectrum, we absolutely do. So, for example, something that I know with certainty about myself is that I'm a huge museum-phile. So museums such as Art Science Museum here in Singapore or the Met in New York City are places where I know that I can experience awe, astonishment, aesthetic appreciation, joy, and a number of other positive emotions. So anytime when I'm feeling tired or hopeless or off balance in some way in my emodiversity, I decide to visit these beautiful cultural temples and drench myself in all of those emotions. And I can tell you that so far I have had a 100% success rate with that. So this is an example of how I choose how I want to feel. It's not a skill that can be learned overnight, but bit by bit, one decision after another, you will become better at recognizing your initial reactive emotions and purposefully choosing the emotions with which you want to respond, which you want to spend time feeling. Now, it's also very easy to slip up, let's be real and honest. I'm probably not the only person in this room today who has plenty of sad, heartbreaking, and even devastating memories in my own past and my family's. These are available to us at all times in our memory bank. I could reach in there right now and pull out an incredibly painful memory and become fully consumed by it, and shift from feeling very excited about this talk and frankly still a bit disgusted by the cockroach and become grief-stricken. But that is a choice which, if repeated over time, I would become used to, and it would lead me into great isolation, poor mental health, depression, and just the absence of so much that is special in our world. So the great challenge that I'm leaving you with at the end of my talk, and that we're all really left with in this world, is finding that balance between allowing an emotion to run through us and do the job that it was meant to do, and not allowing that emotion to run for too long to the point where it becomes damaging to us. And I want to leave you now with the words of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who said, in order to find a new world, we need a map. And in order for us to find a calm mind, we need a map of our emotions. So I wholeheartedly encourage you to plot your own map of emotions, and as soon as possible, begin expanding it by exploring all of its diverse, hidden, and far out lands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teodora.